All right, welcome to round number 5. We have won the die roll, and we'll play first here. Multiple 3-drops in our 1-lander is a little bit of a concern. I can use Traverse to find our basic swamp. Having Battle Rage in a threatless hand is not very appealing either, especially when I'm talking about using this Traverse to find a land. So while I feel like I can get away with keeping this hand, I'm not very interested in trying to. This hand starts off a little better. I'm going to keep the Street Wraith because of what it does for my Death Shadow here. Let's start on Street Wraith since we already know what's on top. See Inquisition of Kozilek. Well, that's a good one. We'll cycle into that. Hopefully our opponent's not on burn or anything with all these Street Wraiths going in and out of our hand. But we want to get this Shadow cranking, so next turn we'll have a 3/3 Shadow. Alright, so Grixis. A lot of cantrips here. Snapcaster and a Bolt. So I can play around that Bolt, but it could end up being a hassle for me. I'm just going to take the Snapcaster though. I'm a little bit worried that I will quickly just be on very few spells, and my opponent may have very many. Yeah, I drew a land here, so we may end up being in trouble if these find action for my opponent. Serum Visions first is an interesting choice. It's going to be if they, like, for instance, wanted to top, they would have trouble both with their Polluted Delta and their Thought Scours. I might be tempted to Thought Scour first, especially because I'd be greedy and hope that I would find a Tasigur. Of course, if they find a Tasigur this way, they can Thought Scour into it, so that's just as good. Looks like they do top, so they may end up running into some of that some of those problems I mentioned, but I guess we'll see. Shadow here makes it kind of tempting. I still don't think I can really make... I'm sorry, Liliana here makes my Shadow tempting. I still don't think I can make my opponent's Lightning Bolt good, so I'm going to have to wait on that, which doesn't feel great, but I'll probably fetch into play tapped here. Oh, did my opponent just play a basic? Okay, well that'll solve that problem, the top issue. Let's fetch. I only want to go to 9 specifically, I think, for now. So let's fetch this into play tapped. And then we'll fetch Shock here. Another Shadow, okay. I think I will play them both. That might have been a little conservative of me, considering that I have Basic Swamp in my hand instead of another ability to control my life total. But with my opponent already on 1 Bolt and then just a ton of mystery cards, I think it's important to be a little conservative and not just get crazy. I guess the broader issue with this is that I'm not going to have 5/5s or 6/6s, and I kind of want them to be larger than Taskers and Anglers. I do have Liliana Plus to make up for this issue a little bit, though. Looks like my opponent is delving. So if my opponent also has Stubborn Denial, I'm going to be in some trouble. I don't know. Looks like they've only used one of those Thought Scours, yeah. They may have used this Delta, though. I think they did. So with the way that that just resolved, I have some concerns that my opponent does have a stub. They certainly had an F6, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. Yep, they do have one. So definitely punished here for the way I've manipulated my life total, but again, I felt it important to be a little conservative in the face of Bolt, potentially Snap Bolt. I think in this case I'm going to bobble now. Trying a Thoughtseize. Well, that's not great for my opponent, so at least we've got that going on. But they certainly have quite a few more cards than I. So we're going to have to find a way to leverage these shadows, which means finding a way to pay at least 1 life, and soon. Shadow of my opponent's own. That's not a huge problem. But if they have another one, it is. Okay. So now I get that. I mean, they can use Bolt to grow their shadow out of my shadow's range, although fetch land means they can't. They also can't afford to bolt themselves unless they were blocking with both. So this is good for me. I guess I'm holding this bauble to scare my opponent a little bit. And I think I just attack with both. I guess they could double block, but then they wouldn't be able to bolt themselves. And then I could just kill their shadow and they'd have a Tasigur. I'd have a shadow. No, because then they'd have bolt. I'd be at 6. And they'd still have a Tasigur. So they just get the free double block here. I guess then I would just trade shadows. I wouldn't pay any life. If they block each and I pay 1 life, then they get to bolt themselves. Their shadow eats my shadow. I have no additional way to pay life. Yeah, this is actually just a disaster. This bolt is killing me right now. So I guess blocking them each would be the play, because that forces me to act first so that my Death Shadow doesn't get eaten by their Tasigur. I guess I can't attack at all here. Could attack with just 1. Could attack with just 1. That changes the game quite a bit, right? But then they just take it, and then their Death Shadow becomes enormous. Yeah, I can't do that either. Yeah, I guess I need to wait. Otherwise I think I just die. I guess I'll do this now. Finding a way to deal with this, and they did use their Thoughtseize already. Bloodstained Mire in the revealed zone. I really don't want that, but that forces me to use this fetch now, which is going to be incredibly awkward considering they have their Lightning Bolt. If they do attack with this, though, I can double block and still trade 1 for 1, even with them bolting themselves. I guess it's just really important for me to filter that draw away. Tarmogoyf is a much better draw. Alright, they drew a fetch land, which is actually deceptively good here. Others fetching right away. So now they can attack. Double block actually is kind of bad for me now. It's exactly 7/7. They could use the bolt to finish mine off. But it looks like they're taking an action here first. Not paying life on that early turn has really made this game a lot harder for me. So perhaps that conservative approach early is certainly biting me here, or maybe biting me here, rather. Well, I mean, I have to block this shadow. And if I have to block that shadow, I'm going for a double block. I may lose my whole board, but then I have this Tarmogoyf to follow up with at least. And it's still a 2 for 2, although that's not exactly what I want. Yeah, they just bolt themselves, which seemingly is a worse option. Especially considering I'm simultaneously taking 4. So yeah, I guess we were both thinking about this backwards. I was just being a fool this entire time. I forgot they were going to be attacking with this also. In my head the whole time I was thinking they were only going to be attacking with the shadow. Yeah. So The situation that I was imagining was they attack with the shadow I'm forced to block, considering I'm at 8 and they have Death Shadow and a Lightning Bolt. But when they attack with this as well, I just didn't even register that. But since all damage is dealt simultaneously, my shadows grow to a 9/9 at the same time. They have 5 damage put on each of them, considering that that was previously the lethal amount of damage required. But by the time state-based effects are checked, my shadows won't die because now they're 9/9s, considering I'm at 4, and they have 5 damage marked on them. So my opponent did not want to attack with his Tarmogoyf, and probably just wanted to attack with a shadow, and then I think probably wanted to finish one off with a bolt rather than bolt themselves. But I apologize for not even like registering the fact that they were attacking with that Taliaferro and how good of a position that puts me in. But yeah, just didn't even do that. Didn't even do that in my head when we were going through all the other stuff because I was not thinking that was going to happen. But anyway, so moving on. I definitely want this spell bomb here. I definitely want all of these grindy elements, which is good. This league we haven't even had the opportunity to play much of this, just with the kind of strange matchups we've been getting. But some leagues are like that, I suppose. On top of that, I don't really want my Fatal Push because it only really deals with Death Shadow, and I already have Fatal Pushes and Decay to do that. In fact, I think I even want to shave on a push here so that I have 3 dedicated ways to deal with Death Shadow, and then things like Terminate and even Liliana of the Veil to deal with the larger stuff. On top of that, I want to shave on Discard, but not cut entirely. These matches are certainly grindy, but my opponent also has a lot of interaction, and it's important for me to control the pace of the game. I think I am the aggressor in the matchup. Similarly, Battle Rage is not good in the matchup. My opponent has far too much interaction for this to be good. They can easily just kill my creature in response, have a Stubborn Denial to deal with it, or what have you. That's not to say that there can't be situations where it is powerful, but with all the discard, counter spells, and removal, it's hard to find a good opportunity to make that work. So this is typically the configuration I'm looking for. Some people may say, well, you live in Tarfire, isn't it not very good in the matchup? There's a couple reasons why I do that. A, I want to reserve my actual removal for Death Shadows and things like that. I never want to have to use a Fatal Push on a Snapcaster, and sometimes I'm still going to want to kill those with like Tarfire, Kolaghan's Command, or Liliana the Last Hope, especially if I'm trying to -2 this, for instance. I need to clear the snaps out of the way. But more importantly, I am the aggressor in the matchup, so accelerating my traverses and accelerating my Tarmogoyfs is particularly important. And to expand on that a little bit, I definitely want my Tarmogoyfs to be 5/6s. It's important to me that they're larger than Anglers, and Tarfire can help me do that with even more consistency. So even though Tarfire isn't like, you know, some outstanding ability in the matchup, I think for what it does for our deck as a whole makes it worth leaving in here. This hand is okay. It struggles to pay life at the rate which we're going to need to for these shadows, but it is particularly threat dense, which is kind of nice in this matchup, though we don't have any real interaction, which against Grixis is okay. I'm okay with being threat dense and interaction light, but I need to make sure I can actually cast my threats. I guess we have this Traverse to even cast on turn 1, so at the very least we can run out these Goyfs. So I'll keep. If my opponent discards spells my Traverse on turn 1 rather than cast a Serum Vision, then we could be in a lot of trouble. They may even also stub this Traverse. I guess we drew that, so our opponent's certainly representing stub, in which case I will Inquisition first. All right. Shadow, push, terminate. So they successfully scared me off of doing what I may have otherwise done. Although, of course, if I hadn't drawn Inquisition, I still would have just fired this off and hoped for the best. But I think I'm just going to try and outsize their shadows. And now that I even have the souls, if I can draw a land for that, I think we'll just try to be more threat dense than them. So we will take one of those removal spells and try to lean on our threats instead of try to deal with their shadows. All right, I missed in that regard. This does give me something good to do with my turn, though, if I also have to traverse at least. So traverse for basic Inquisition here is not a terrible exchange. I'm gonna take the Terminate here. I don't mind getting walloped by a shadow early, since I just have a million creatures myself. Thought Scour. Street Wraith. Okay. Well, that's going to make their two shadows very large early, which is not what we anticipated. Oh, they only cast one. That's good for me, I think. Even better. Unfortunately, I can't afford to take that shadow here. This could mean they drew Stubborn Denial as well, but either way, I think it's important for me to use my turn to cast Tarmogoyf rather than just seize that shadow. Although seizing the shadow might be better, but the potential that my opponent has drawn Stubborn Denial is a little bit too high. I mean, they may be playing around something like Maelstrom Pulse, something of that sort, but pretty sure they still have this Bloodstained Mire, if I'm not mistaken. Although they did play a Bloodstained Mire on turn 1, and it's possible that's the one that I guess I was on the draw, though. So no, I think this is correct. They Serum Visions and Serum Visions. Oh, they also cycled another Street Wraith in the middle of that, so this is now a 6/6. So the interesting part is they can make it a 9/9 and hit me with this, but then suddenly I can cast my shadows. Wonder if I'm supposed to Thoughtseize and cast one shadow. The big problem is that my opponent's shadows are going to be exactly large enough that I can't take a hit from them. So I'm going to have to grow my shadows on my own, which means drawing a fetch land. But if I can draw a fetch land, I can lean heavily on this Lingering Souls, hopefully, to buy me some time. I also have the availability to double block, of course. If my opponent has any kind of removal spell, though, I'm just going to get completely blown out. Plus, I really can't double block. They can grow them to 9/9s, so takes my Lingering Souls, which does allow me to cast it, so that's good. Another shadow. Well, this game's looking pretty bad for me. Fetch now is fine. I just have to chump these. Being at exactly 9 is such a bummer here. If I draw a fetch land, that's unfortunate. Guess I just have to flashback Souls here. But I'm basically just dead. Oh, they just also have a stub. Okay. Yep, we got walloped. But we did never draw land that game. It's just a little too clunky for us there. All right. I think we're going to run it back same way. Nothing really I want to change here. Play draw. If I had drawn a fetch land there, I likely would have went for Thoughtseize plus Fetch Shock plus Death Shadow, which would put me to 4 as well, right? Yeah. And then I could have at least tried to trade shadows. This hand, again, land light, but has a lot of manipulation, has some interaction, has the ability to go tutor for a threat. So we're going to start on bubble. If it's a card we want, Stomping Ground. Stomping Ground is not the best land for us, but I do need a land, so, and I even really need a third, so we'll take it. Get Blood Crypt. I already have 2 red spells in my hand. It's not inconceivable I would want double red in this game. Alright, opponent's hand, not bad. Lines up pretty well with mine, actually. Because if I take the Inquisition, then the Stubborn might be a problem. Though they do need to find a threat. If I take the Stubborn, then the Inquisition could be a problem. I'm going to take the Inquisition because that way I at least retain information. They do also have this Fatal Push, though, so I'm not exactly getting him anytime soon with how light I am on removal. It's possible I'm supposed to take the Stubborn Denial and hope to draw well. Considering that the Stubborn Denial is more immediately irritating. Overgrown Trip puts me to 12. Then I can traverse for Shadow, cast Shadow, Shadow dies to push, and then I can hope to Kolaghan's Command it back someday. I think that's the plan. This does prevent me from... Maybe I should have got a white source here. White-black. No, I couldn't, obviously. I would have had to shock here, and then I couldn't have cast Death Shadow. That was the only thing I could get there. But it leads on Thought Scour. Also, I think they used their Delta last turn. There's the Tarn. So if they like push plus something else, then I can actually command. If they just like slam Tasigur or keep up Stubborn Denial, I'm pretty sad. Yeah, but that's what's happening. Oh no. Hopefully they'll also push so I can terminate. Now the Stubborn Denial is just a disaster. I really need my opponent to not draw one of these so quickly. Or I could draw an additional threat, I suppose. I will cycle this now. So the advantage of this is that I can force my opponent into a situation where they want to Fatal Push this on my turn, and then I can terminate this. Yeah. I guess. Let's see what they're drawing. They're drawing a Delta. I really also want this K command to resolve, but I think it's more important that I get this off the table. Maybe it isn't. I need to think carefully about this. But the problem is that I go to 4. This is actually a really tough decision. Conservative line being terminate this. Aggressive line being you discard an irrelevant land. I return this Shadow that you've killed and don't get to cast it until next turn. I think I take the aggressive line here. My opponent doesn't even have 1 red source in play right now and is unlikely to have many burn spells post board, if any. So I'll take this, you discard. Definitely a risk here, but I'm so threat light, and I know my opponent will have stub for this terminate now, but if I terminate this, I guess the advantage of terminate now is that if I draw a 4th land, I can play around the Force Spike, but the fact is I don't have one currently, so it's likely that even though they won't have the threat, that Stubborn Denial will be good enough as a Force Spike. The risk that this line presents is if my opponent has an additional threat, I'm just like completely screwed. So the question is, am I more interested in getting this terminate stubbed or this fatal push stubbed? I mean, traverse the Evenwald stubbed. And I'm pretty sure I'd rather get the terminate stubbed. But I can't cast them both on the same turn anyway without paying a bunch of life, which I'm not interested in doing. Yep, that is a disaster, so I am dead. This is why we don't take the aggressive line, I guess, but we know all the other cards in their hand. This is just the one mystery card. Yeah, well, there's nothing I can do now. Except hope they cast something else, I guess. Maybe I should have traversed. Yeah, I guess I should have traversed in case that one card was terminate. Then maybe I don't lose here. Yep. Well, that did not go my way here, but there are a couple ways I could have played that differently. I think the first... Oh, Magic Online. Why you do this to me? Well, we'll worry about that in a minute. The first thing we could have done differently, we can still kind of see it even if I can't zoom on it anymore and it's all grayed out, but the first thing I could have done differently here is this Kolaghan's command. I could have terminated that turn instead and then just taken a way slower game plan, hoped that I could eventually draw fourth land, play around Force Spike, maybe my opponent doesn't have another removal spell. That's probably better. Alternatively, later in the game, that final turn, I could have traversed. If I do traverse, there's the potential for my opponent to stubborn denial that, because they'll be thinking, well, they'll grab another Death Shadow and then have a Death Shadow to play. If they don't stubborn denial it, then I can grab another Death Shadow and have another Death Shadow to play. So yeah, that was just a huge mistake. The more and more I think about that, there's basically no reason not to stubborn denial there. In my mind, the problem was I was thinking I was saving this traverse to get a Ranger Vios, but that's not what I need right now. I just need my opponent to trade their stubborn denial with my card so that I can fetch for basic swamp, terminate their Tasker, even if they have a way to deal with mine, and at the very least, then we're both top decking with nothing. I'm certainly at a much lower life total, and they can likely win from there, but I'll at least be ahead of where I am now, which is dead. So, not the best 5 matches I've ever had with Jund Shadow, but certainly some weird matchups and some mistakes were definitely made. I think this game in particular will be one that I feel like I definitely could have played better and definitely could have played it to a W, so I'll have to think about that some more. But I guess I will see you in the wrap up in just a bit here.